In this video, we're going to look at how to create a persistent Docker image for PowerShell Universal. So we actually provide a Docker image up on Docker Hub for every version of PowerShell Universal. So you can actually use the latest label if you want to actually, or tag to get the latest version of PowerShell Universal. You can also get specific versions if you want to kind of pin to a version, because we have tags for each one of those. From there, we're going to want to create a Docker file based on that pre-built image that we have. So our images by default are running Ubuntu with PowerShell Universal, and we're basing that on the Microsoft PowerShell container images. So it actually has PowerShell 7 installed. Then we're going to be exposing port 5000 because we listen on 5000 by default. You could change this to 80 if you wanted it to be like standard HTTP. Then we're going to create a new volume. And we are going to set some environment variables here to adjust where we're storing the data. So rather than storing in the default location, which isn't persistent, every time you restart the container, it's going to delete that. In this case, we're actually going to be setting the repository, the database, and the assets folder, and then the logging path all into our persistent volume. From there, what we want to do is actually build our Docker image. So to do that, we're going to use docker build, and we're just going to say dot because we're in the current folder where this Docker file is, and then we're just going to tag this as universal persistent. So that's going to pull down the PowerShell Universal Docker image from Docker Hub, build it based on, or layer this on top of that image, so we have different environment variables set. And now if we actually go to our images folder here, I'm actually using the Docker PowerShell or Visual Studio Code extension. And you can see now we have a universal persistent created. So let's go ahead and run that. So what I'm going to do to run that is use this command here. So I'm using docker run interactive. I'm going to name it PowerShell Universal. I'm actually going to mount a volume. So I'm going to mount a PSU data volume to my target home data. So you can see that maps to these files here, or these paths here. So that will allow me to kind of create a persistent volume. So now we're going to map port 5000 to 5000 on TCP, and we're going to be using our universal persistent latest image. So when I run that, it's going to start up my container, and now you can see my container is running. And we do have our persistent home data folder created here. It has some logs in it already, and it has our database created. So let's actually navigate to PowerShell Universal. And you can see PowerShell Universal here is running on port 5000, and it's actually running inside that container. So if we log in, I'm logged into my instance. You can see my node is actually that Docker node instance. And what we can do is create a new script. We're just going to go version, click OK, and then we'll say PS version table just to see what it looks like inside this container. Run that script. And you can see we're running PowerShell 7.2.5 on Linux, pretty much inside Microsoft Standard WSL2. So it's actually running inside my Windows subsystem for Linux. So now let's go ahead and go back to this folder here, and you can see now it's created my repository folder. You can see I have my my versions folder here with my versions PS1 script with my PS version table in it. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to restart this container. So if I were to do this in a non-persistent way, I would lose my script, my database, my logs. But since we set it up this way, we can just restart this container. And once that's restarted, we're going to go back to our browser. If this restarts, should have restarted by now. And you can see my script is still there. My job is still there that I just ran. So we have our version.ps1 is still in here, and our job history is still in here based on that job that I ran before. You can also see your volumes in here. So if I click the refresh here, you can see here's my PSU data volume. And you can do things like inspect it. If you do want to remove it, you can also remove it from here. So in this video, we went over how to create a persistent Docker image and container using the PowerShell Universal Docker image that you can find on Docker Hub.